So what do you do when the joy tank runs empty? What do you do when it's getting hard to talk, because the peace is not there and it's affecting relationships?
Well, what Paul and I do when those kind of feelings are coming on, we take the time to sit down and just acknowledge all the things that we've seen the Lord do in our lives since the last time we sat down and did this process.
The thing is that God is working all around us. The problem is that we either miss what he's doing, or we forget what he's doing, or we take credit for what he's doing. The reason it's important that you don't miss what God is doing in your life is because when you do, you leave behind the most important part of the blessing. You leave behind the joy, you leave behind the peace, you leave behind the understanding that you gain.
We've been keeping our list for several years now, and we've realized that there has not been a single time that we have sat down and gone through this process that we don't come away from that time of just feeling a flood of joy and peace back in our lives.
Well, good morning. How's everybody doing today? Yeah? Good. I love the Truellas so much. They are near and dear to my heart, and those people practice what they preach. I saw that video for the first time when I got here this morning, and I was like, you know what? I might just not say anything today. We'll just take what they have said and we'll go and it'll be fine. We'll put it into practice. And I think joy will well up in us if we would listen to the things they have to share with us. But nonetheless, I am excited to be with you guys this morning. If you're a guest, my name is Michael Bailey. I am one of the pastors here. I do want to say up front, just a happy Mother's Day to all of you mamas out there. We really are. I know we've said it a bunch already this morning. We really are grateful for you, who you are, what you've done, how you've served us and your kids, to raise us and help us, be more fully functioning humans and adults and just followers of Jesus and everything in between. One day a year is probably not enough for us to adequately express our gratitude for the roles that you play in our lives, but we did want to say up here up front just that we really are grateful for you and all that you do. And at the same time, I did want to recognize, I also know that Mother's Day can be a hard day for some for a variety of reasons. And if that's you, I just want you to know that we love you too. And genuinely, we really do hope that our community can be a place of loving support for you, regardless of whatever your pain may be related to Mother's Day or not. But please just know we love you and we're grateful that you're here. So we are starting a new series today through the book of Philippians, and it's going to carry us through the summer. And if you're new around here, an important thing to know is that we highly, as a people, we highly value the library of scripture that we call the Bible. We believe that it is God's word to us, that it is a treasure trove of wisdom for life. It is a lamp for our feet and a light for our path, as it says about itself. But namely, that it shows us the truth about ourselves, as well as the truth about God in such a way that it leads us to Jesus, that it points us and directs our lives to Jesus. And so we around here, we preach the Bible unapologetically. And I just want to say that to you up front if you're new. We preach it unapologetically. And sometimes that will look like we take a look at different topics that the Bible addresses. Sometimes it looks like working our way through entire books and passages that address lots of different things regarding our faith and our discipleship to Jesus. And that's going to be the type of endeavor that this series through Philippians is going to be. We're going to look at a lot of different things that Paul unpacks through this entire text. And our game plan is to take this summer to study this portion of scripture together alongside the other two churches in our family of churches, which is something I am particularly excited about because that means this summer you are going to get to do more than just hear from me and Brandon. You're going to get to hear from a lot of our other pastors from across our family of churches who are going to come here and help open up the word of God together with us. And so I'm pumped for some of our guys from the FOC to come be with us from time to time. But overall, what we are aiming to do with this is we're aiming to unpack what Paul's words meant for the Philippian church and then connect those dots to how those things should apply and affect us today. Because we believe that there is some very good and timely encouragement, wisdom, and instruction found in this letter for us as followers of Jesus, specifically for us now in this cultural moment that we find ourselves in. And so we're going to start where all journeys start, at the beginning. We'll start with Paul's introduction that will help set up some of the context and the tone for everything else we're going to cover for the next 3 or so months. So let's dive in. We're going to be in Philippians chapter 1, verses 1 through 11. I'm going to read the whole thing and then we'll talk for a bit. Let's pray. Let's read. Maybe we should pray too. We'll see. All right, verse 1. Paul and Timothy, servants of Christ Jesus, to all the saints in Christ Jesus who are at Philippi, with the overseers and the deacons. Grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. I thank my God in all my remembrance of you, always, in every prayer of mine for you all, making my prayer with joy because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now. And I'm sure of this, that he who began a good work in you will bring it to completion in the day of Jesus Christ. And it is right for me to feel this way about you all because I hold you in my heart, for you are all partakers with me of grace, both in my imprisonment and in the defense and confirmation of the gospel. For God is my witness, how I yearn for you all with the affection of Christ Jesus. And it is my prayer that your love may abound more and more with knowledge and all discernment, so that you may approve what is excellent and so be pure and blameless for the day of Christ, filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ, to the glory and praise of God. This is the word of the Lord. So these first few sentences here at the beginning of Paul's letter really set the tone and the context for the rest of everything else that he's going to say and unpack. And namely, what we see here is we see Paul writing to the Philippian church with this overabundance of thankfulness and joy. He's got so much thankfulness and joy for them. In fact, it's been argued that these are the things in particular that actually set this letter apart in the New Testament from all the other things that Paul has written. For instance, in this letter specifically, there isn't really any rebuke in the whole thing. So generally speaking, most of Paul's letters are correcting something that has gone wrong in the various churches that he's writing to, either something theologically that has happened that is incorrect, or something practically that they are doing or living in that just doesn't actually match the way of Jesus. And so, for example, for those of y'all who were here when we did 1 Corinthians several years ago, whenever it was, you'll notice that there is going to be a distinct difference in the types of things that Paul says in Philippians than what he does in 1 Corinthians. In 1 Corinthians, Paul rebuked and corrected all kinds of drama that was happening in the Corinthian church. I mean, they were a mess. There were racial and theological and economic divisions happening all over the place. There was a guy sleeping around with his mother-in-law, and Paul is like, y'all, this is not how the people of God are meant to be. This is not how the people of God are meant to carry themselves. But that is not the case for the Philippians. Paul certainly has some teaching that he gives them throughout this letter, but what you're quickly going to notice is that virtually every page is marked with Paul's deep concern and care for this little community of believers. Almost every verse drips with a joy and a thankfulness and a hope and an encouragement for these people. And this has actually led some commentators to go as far as to say that everything in this book is all about joy. That everything Paul is writing about is rooted in joy. In fact, the word joy in Greek and its derivatives are repeated some 16 times over the course of these quick 4 chapters, which makes for a very solid argument that that Philippians is one of, if not the most, joy-soaked book in the entire Bible. And you can see it in just about everything that Paul writes and says. This is why some verses found here are verses that Christians have found the most encouraging and inspirational throughout the centuries, the types of verses that we put on our coffee mugs or on our tattoos if we're particularly edgy or whatever it may be. Verses like Philippians Chapter 1, verse 21, that says, "For me to live is Christ and to die is gain." Or Philippians 4, verse 4, that says, "Rejoice," or "Take joy in the Lord always. Again, I say to you, rejoice, take joy." Or the athlete's favorite, Philippians 4:13, "I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength." We love it. It's what he expresses for himself, and it's what he wishes for the Philippians. And now, at first glance, that might just sound to you like a neat little anecdote about the letter. Like, oh, that's a cool feature. That's nice to know. But when you actually know the backstory about where Paul is coming from and where the Philippian church are coming from and where Paul is writing this, it actually makes the things that Paul says in this book all the more astounding. It actually makes the posture that Paul takes all the more almost unbelievably amazing when you know it. And so I want to share a little bit with you this morning. You see, Paul and the Philippian church have a little bit of history. They have a little bit of history. The Philippian church was the first church started by Paul in Eastern Europe, which Again, that might sound like an inconsequential detail to you, but geographically speaking, that's kind of a big deal. So I got a map for you. If you look at this map, you'll see a lot of the key areas for the events in the life of the early church, all right? So just to give you a frame of reference, all of Jesus's earthly life and ministry happened in that little bottom right-hand corner right there. But by the end of the book of Acts, the movement of Jesus' followers has spread far and wide across all of this portion of the Mediterranean part of the Roman Empire. For the record, it was something like 1,400 miles, which is just a few hundred miles shy of the total distance between like Maine and Florida, all right? That's the type of geographic area we're talking about. That's the type of area we're talking that this movement of the gospel spread in just a few short years. And Philippi was the first little outpost of God's kingdom outside of the Middle East. It was a fairly urban city located on what was called the Egnatian Way, which was a pretty significant trade route in the Roman Empire. It was a gateway, so to speak, across the empire with a lot of economic and cultural diversity. Additionally, it was a Roman colony, so it had a culture that just embodied a lot of national pride and importance placed on being a Roman citizen and having a Roman identity. And Paul enters into this environment preaching the good news of God's kingdom, and it gets pretty wild, all right? It gets pretty wild. So their origin story is found in Acts 16, and it's one of my favorite church planting stories in the entire Bible. Paul and Timothy arrive in Philippi around 51 AD, and they meet a woman named Lydia, who's a wealthy businesswoman in the city. And she also happens to be a devout follower of Judaism. And Paul and Timothy tell her about Jesus, and she gets saved, and she becomes this first member and leader and donor. She's like financially backing the whole movement type deal of this church plant in the city. And then just a few days later, they meet this demon-possessed slave girl who has a reputation for predicting the future, right? This is where we're at. And the Holy Spirit heals her, and she comes to faith in Jesus and becomes a disciple too. And that makes the people who were using her to make money get really, really mad. And they start causing this ruckus between Paul and Timothy that actually winds up landing Paul and Timothy in jail, which, spoiler alert, kind of becomes Paul's habit. He has this habit of telling people about Jesus, getting thrown in jail, telling people about Jesus, getting thrown in jail over and over and over again. But does Paul think that stops what God is going to do? Absolutely not. They wind up sharing the gospel with the prison guard, and he becomes a Christian. And then this mismatched group girl and a Roman cop become the core team, so to speak, of this new church plant in this bustling city. And I love it. And I love it for a lot of reasons, but one specifically is that if you think the people in your life group are too different from you for you to be family with, you haven't seen anything, right? Like this diverse group of people, it's amazing. It's a beautiful story about the power of the Holy Spirit to not only save and heal such a vastly diverse group of people, but it's his ability to unite them together in the gospel. It's beautiful, and it's what we're after. But eventually what happens is Paul and Timothy basically get run out of town, and this little group of mismatched believers in Jesus are left to carry on the ministry of the gospel by themselves. They're left to keep going in Paul's absence. And this is part of what Paul is talking about in verse 5 when he says, because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now. He's saying, I'm so thankful for you, and I pray for you with joy because you guys were ride or die with me from the beginning. You were with me from the jump. When I was getting thrown into prison and then run out of town, you guys were with me. You were by my side, and not just while things were physically going well and I was with you, but when things got hard and I wasn't. The Greek word here for partnership is the Greek term koinonia, and we often talk about it as fellowship. We talk about it a lot in that way, but my favorite way to describe it really is to think about it as what happens when you hold hands with someone you love, right? Like this is kind of how me and my wife hold hands or whatever. And what are your fingers doing here when you do this? It's not a trick question. Interlocked. My favorite way to say it is interdigitating. That's what's actually happening here. Your fingers are enmeshed together, right? They're interlocked, they're interdigitated. This is really what the Greek idea of koinonia really means, that their lives become interlocked together. Their lives are enmeshed with each other such that their joys are your joys. Their hurts become your hurts. Their needs are your needs, and you support one another. You care for one another. You generously give to one another without thinking twice, even in hard times, because your lives are partnered together. And that's exactly how the Philippians thought about Paul, and that's exactly what they did for Paul. So fast forward about 10 years from when Paul first arrived. It's 61 or 62 AD. The Philippian church has grown. More people have become disciples of Jesus in the city. And Paul is imprisoned again, but this time further away. This time he's all the way across the Mediterranean Sea over in Rome. Now, it's important to note that during this era, Roman prisons were not like the state-run facilities that we have today. Not that those are exceptionally luxurious or anything, but the way that Roman prisons worked was that the responsibility for your well-being in a Roman prison fell on you. You were responsible for your well-being if you were in jail. Your food, your clothing, your health care, and the like, it was all on you to take care of. But you were also not permitted to work in order to earn money to take care of those things. So essentially, if you were imprisoned in a Roman prison, you were at the mercy of your friends and relatives for care. So 10 years later, here's Paul. He's in this type of prison on his own. In fact, there's a moment in another one of his letters where he actually says that everyone has abandoned him, meaning that many who were by his side have basically left him for dead in this prison cell. And the Philippian church finds out about this, and they essentially say, no, not on our watch, Paul. And so they all decide to give sacrificially out of their bank accounts and send one of their own guys named Epaphroditus to go all the way over to Rome to make sure Paul is taken care of. And here's the key detail. At the moment of this writing, Paul is still there. At the moment of this writing, Paul is still there in this Roman prison. And I need you to think about that for just a moment. Paul's career has been about planting churches. He's sort of hit his stride, so to speak. Literally, the gospel has spread across thousands of miles in the Roman Empire due to God's work in and through him. He's essentially in the prime of his life, and yet he finds himself locked down. Now, I don't know about you, but for me personally, I am really good at the opposite when things start going wrong, right? I am really good at embodying a totally different posture when life stinks. I am incredibly good at being full of discouragement and criticism and complaint when life doesn't go the way that I thought it would go or things are bad for me. I'm incredible at noticing what is wrong and what isn't working and what needs to change. And it takes far, far less to get me worked up and angry and grumpy. Like, for example, just let my schedule get interrupted unexpectedly, right? Like much less being sent to prison, and I am ready to burn something to the ground. Maybe that's just me, but I feel like I'm probably in good company here this morning, all right? Like I feel like that's probably more than just this guy up here on stage. Yet Paul overflows with something else. Paul embodies something radically different. Instead of complaint, he gives thanks. Instead of frustration and anger, he shows love. And instead of despair and fear, he expresses deep, deep joy. And quite simply, I think that just begs the question, how? How can Paul have experienced all of these things? How can he be currently rotting away in a Roman prison and have this type of attitude, to have this type of posture? How can that be possible? And maybe even more to the point, how could that type of living and being even remotely be possible for me too? How can that even be true for me, to be a person of joy and faith and hope and thanksgiving in the face of difficulty and suffering and hardship and uncertainty? How? As we'll see, the letter to the Philippians basically says, I'll show you how. I'll show you how. I'll show you why Paul can have this mentality. And over the next several weeks, Paul's words will expose it in a lot of different ways, some that we probably expect and some that we probably won't. But today, I want you to see a part of it that is mentioned here in this introduction, and it comes from verse 6. This is what he writes, verse 6. And I'm sure of this. In other words, he's so confident in what he's about to say, you can take it to the bank. He says, and I am sure of this, that he who began a good work in you will bring it to completion at the day of Jesus Christ. Completion is the Greek word epiteleu. Some translations read it as perfection, but it's a bit more accurate to think of it as to bring to the end goal or to the finish line, if I may. Essentially, Paul is saying, here is what I know for certain. Here's what I know. God is going to finish what he started. God is going to finish what he started. You see, God is not like you and me. He's not like you and me. And by that, here's what I mean. He's not the dad like me who has 2 kids and an overgrown yard and a dozen house projects that need completing, who says, oh, you know what? I really do need to get to that. I need to do that. I'll do it one day. And then I just let it ride. God is not like that. God is not a procrastinator. And by that, I don't mean that God doesn't take his time. He absolutely takes his time, sometimes longer than we would like him to. But by that, I mean God doesn't ignore the things that he has committed himself to. He doesn't abandon things in the middle of working on them. He's not the type to start a project and get into it and decide, oh, this wasn't really worth my time. No, when God decides to do something, he sees it through. He's there working in the midst of it, even when we struggle to see it, even when it seems like we're all on our own, even when it seems like the future may be uncertain. Paul is saying, the thing that I know for sure is that God is not a quitter. He is not a quitter. And if God didn't quit on me, he's not going to quit on you. Like the next verse says, verse 7, it is right for me to feel this way about you all because I hold you in my heart. For you are all partakers with me of grace, both in my imprisonment and in the defense and confirmation of the gospel. He's saying it's right for me to feel this way about you because I know of your salvation. I know of how you have received God's grace and how it shaped and changed you. I've walked with you. I've seen how Jesus has transformed all of you, taking that small little ragtag core group in the beginning and turning you into the church that you are today. The kind of people who would share in my imprisonment, that would come to my aid when I need it. For Paul, you see, the Philippian church is living proof of God's faithfulness. They're the walking embodiment of God's commitment to his people, his provision, of his never quitting care and concern for his church. And so what Paul is able to do is he's able to look back on all their history and say, I can see that God was at work here, and I can see that he was at work here, and I can see he was doing here. Even if we didn't realize it then, I can see God's hands all over this entire thing. He's actually using it for things that you wouldn't even believe, as we'll see later on in a few chapters. And it gives him great joy and gratitude for who this God is. And as a pastor, let me just say, I really relate to Paul here. Like one of the things that stokes my joy and gratitude in Christ and for our church are the stories of God's grace and faithfulness in you. And what he's done in and through your life, seeing the way that God works in our midst, how he grows us, how he shapes us, how he makes us into things that we previously weren't. So, for example, the other day, my life group and I, we were hanging out, and this was like right after Easter, and we were reflecting on all the folks that got baptized on Easter. And so we were thinking about Tony and Terry Lynn's stories of baptisms that we saw here. And man, I was telling them, I love that line. I don't know if y'all remember this. I love that line that Terry Lynn just dropped like it was nothing when she spoke about the work that God had been doing in her life, where she was like talking about coming to faith, and she simply said, but this is what God does, right? He takes broken glass and makes stained glass windows. And as a preacher, I was sitting over here like losing my mind because I was like, that is fire, and I'm going to make sure I work it into a sermon, which is exactly what I'm doing right now. But I couldn't believe it because it was like, that is so good because that is so true. That is what God does. That is who he is. He doesn't stop no matter what the mess we're in feels like. He is there doing things that we couldn't even see. And while the life group was talking about those baptisms, we also talked about a baptism that our downtown church was celebrating, a baptism of a guy named Mitch. They actually recorded a video of it downtown, and I highly recommend you check it out. But the gist of it is that Mitch, he's an 80-something-year-old new believer in Jesus. And he spent the majority of his life as an atheist who was more critical of God than someone open to believing with him. And I won't spoil you all the details, but one of the guys in my life group, after watching the video, just said, after we talked about Tony and Terry Lynn, and he'd watched the video, he just said, man, it hit me. I'm watching this video, and I'm watching it through tears because it hit me. God just don't quit. God just doesn't quit. It doesn't matter how old I am. It doesn't matter where I'm from. It doesn't matter what I've done. It doesn't matter who I am or where I'm at. God just doesn't quit. He doesn't stop working. He doesn't give up on us. He sees things through. And this is actually the narrative line drawn throughout the entire Bible, that this is who our God is. God is a God who refuses to quit on the world and the people that he made and he loves. It is almost on every page of Scripture. In Genesis, we see he makes the world and everything in it out of an overflow of love and joy, and that he creates humans specifically to enjoy him and the world that he made. And our earliest grandparents, they mess things up, they sin, and they mar God's perfect creation, bringing destruction and heartache and every bad thing into the world. But does that cause God to quit? No, not at all. In fact, he immediately gets to work, covering their shame and promising victory over the work of the serpent and moving on a plan to make right that everything sin had made wrong when his people were enslaved in a foreign land, suffering the oppression and hopelessness at the hands of an evil and powerful ruler called Pharaoh. Did that cause God to quit? Not even close. Not even close. He rescues them, flexing on Pharaoh as if to say, let me show you who the real king of the world is. And he walked his people through the sea, leading them by fire at night, feeding them with bread from heaven, and eventually bringing them into a land to call their own. And when this same people throughout their history turned their backs on God, from wandering in the desert to the judges and the kings forgot him, when they turned their backs on him to go their own way, when they complained and sinned and followed other gods, did God quit on them then? No, he didn't. He didn't throw in the towel. He didn't give up on his promise to reverse the curse of sin, to call a people to himself. Rather, in love, he rebuked them through the prophets to call them back to himself, and he spoke his promises afresh to finish what he started at the very beginning. When Jesus, God enfleshed, the one promised to redeem the world, was hanging on a cross where he could have easily said, this isn't worth it. Where he could have easily commanded the nails to leave his hands and his feet and gotten down and walked away. Did he even quit then? No, he stayed. For every excruciating moment, he stayed until his lips cried out, it is finished. It is finished. And he walked out of the tomb 3 days later as a victorious declaration that the kingdom of God was breaking in, and that the day that Paul here calls the day of the Lord Jesus Christ, the day when every enemy, when every sin, when every tear, when every bad thing, when every result of the serpent's work will be fully and finally eradicated, that day is coming. And this is where Paul's joy lies. This is what gives him confidence and hope, because he knows that no matter the situation, no matter whether he's in prison or free, no matter whether he's with his friends or not, no matter what the adversity he'll face is, no matter the pain or the heartache or the struggle, he knows that the future is fixed and God is going to finish what he started. He knows that God is going to finish what he started. And his pattern over and over again is that when things look bad, God's not done. When things look bad, God's not done. And for the record here, Paul is not being some sort of blind optimist or an idealist. He's being a realist here. And I need you to see the difference, all right? Idealism is obsessed with life being ideal, but life is anything but ideal. Life will rarely ever be ideal. Your marriage is not ideal. Your job is not ideal. Your church, as much as I love us, we are not ideal. God is at work, but not ideal. And what idealism does is it generally leads us to depression, not joy, because you don't live in an ideal world. And optimism is often just a cover for wishful thinking that's not grounded in fact, but that's not what Paul expresses here. Paul's realism here says, I know it's hard. I know these circumstances are not ideal, but the tomb is empty, so anything is possible. The tomb is empty, so anything is possible. And Paul wants the Philippian church and subsequently us to know that this is true for them too. It's true for them too. I mean, can you imagine for a moment what they might be feeling at this juncture? I mean, just kind of put yourself in their shoes for just a second. They've learned that their guy, Paul, is rotting away in a Roman prison. The man who not only shared his life with them, but the life-changing news of Jesus, the person they love and respect and have a deep care and concern for, is facing potential execution. I can only imagine that they're thinking things like, what now? What's going to happen? Where are we going to go? What's this going to be? What if Paul does get executed? What will we do? What will that mean for us? What will that mean for what God is doing around us? And Paul's reminder here is that no matter how things may seem, God is not done. He's not done with you. He's not done with your family. He's not done with your life group. He's not done with our church. He is not done with our world. He's not done. And what he has promised to do, to save you, to change you, to heal you, to fix you, to make right everything that sin has made wrong, to give you himself for eternity, he is going to do. He's going to do it. Maybe in this age, but for certain in the one to come. And the road he takes to get there might not be the one that you thought he would. It might be literal or proverbial prison like Paul, but he won't quit. He's not done. He's going to finish what he started. So I spent some time with a guy named Phil this past week. Phil, he's a middle-aged guy from South Georgia with a wife and 2 kids, and he's a dude who honestly, he just carries himself with like an immensely positive attitude. He's a real grass is always green type guy, if you can kind of get the mental image. And come to find out, when I was hanging out with him, about a year or so ago, Phil was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer that has since spread to his lymph nodes and to his brain. And he just kind of dropped that little nugget about his cancer into conversation and then just kept moving on talking about something else. And it left me being like, whoa, Phil, hold up, run that back. Are you telling me you've got stage 4 cancer right now? Like right now? And he was like, yeah, I do. And I was just like, and is that not a big deal to you? What? How can you be so nonchalant? And he said, oh, no, it is. But I know a lot of people, when they find something like that out, get real worried and sad about what's going to happen. But if I can be honest, it's been the biggest blessing in my life. For the record, I'm sitting there hardly able to believe the words that I'm hearing from this guy. But he went on. He said, you see, I grew up believing in God, but I wasn't really serious about him. I wasn't much of a church guy when I was younger. But the truth is that the cancer actually changed all of that. It changed all of that for me. The cancer actually brought me to Jesus. And certainly it was not the road that I would have picked, but it is what God gave me to bring me to him. And now I just know that for whatever happens to me and my family are going to be okay. We're going to be just fine because God's got us. And for the record, he and I were getting ready to go turkey hunting together, and I'm sitting in this pickup just choking back tears. Like, how am I supposed to slay a thunder chicken right now when, like, you got me doing all of this? Like, I'm not ready. I'm not ready, Phil. But I'm sitting there crying because he was able to look at what is probably the worst thing that could happen in his life and see that God was using it. That he was using it for his good and to finish what he started. And that's all I really want to leave us with today as we begin this journey together. I just want to put that out there for us today, that there are lots of things that can help us have joy, but the one we see here is to believe. To believe that the tomb is in fact empty. And that means that the best is yet to come. It does. How can you have joy when things are terrible, when things are less than ideal, when you've got cancer, or when you're in a prison, or when your kids are running away from Jesus, when work is horrible for you, or you lost your job, or life just didn't turn out the way you thought it was going to turn out? It is to know, to believe down in the depths of you that God is going to finish what he started. The story is not over yet. It is all a work in progress. Your life, your job, your marriage, your church, your world. It's all a work in progress, but out there on the horizon is a beautiful ending that is coming. Right now, yeah, it's hard, it's rough, maybe it's a really, really dark chapter, but we know that it ends well, and God is not done. And so as we begin this journey of joy through Philippians, I just want to encourage you with this today, and this will be the last thing that I really say to you. Whoever you are, God is not done with you today. God is not done with you today. For those of you who are in the middle of your own what now scenario, I don't know how you might feel about where you're at. I'm sure it certainly feels less than ideal, but what I do know is God, the same God who rose Jesus from the dead, is alive and at work in you and around you. And you may not feel it right now, and your circumstances might not change in this lifetime, but this same Jesus now sits at the right hand of the Father, and he loves you, and he is smiling at you. He is delighted in you, and one day you will be with him, and he has not abandoned you, and he will never forsake you, and those are promises that you can hold on to. And there is nothing on earth that can separate you from the promises of God, whether that be unemployment or singleness, or a separation, or a divorce, or a missed opportunity, or whatever it is. God is for you and is working everything in your life to give you more of himself and to make you more into the human, into the image of Jesus that he has made you to be. So hear me. You might be done in your marriage, but God is not. He's not. God is not done with your kids. God is not done with your struggle or your pain. God is not done with you. He's not done with you. And this is where we're going in this series. We want to have this vision for our lives and one another that is brimming over the edge, like Paul, overflowing with hope and joy because we have the conviction that God is not done. And I know for many of us, to be those kinds of people, it's not going to be as simple as flipping a switch, right? Like we're not just going to be able to turn that on and off. To be these kinds of people, it's going to be something that we have to cultivate, and it's probably not going to come naturally or easily for many of us. And so here's going to be what we do. We're going to do something together through this entire series. I'm going to invite us all into a corporate practice for the next few months. If you're new with us, this is something that we try to do with our longer sermon series. We want to have a spiritual practice that coincides with the things that we're studying and learning and doing together. These are things like fasting or prayer or scripture reading and the like. And for this series, we are going to practice gratitude together. As a people, we're going to practice gratitude. And maybe you've never thought of gratitude as a practice, but here's all it is. Biblical gratitude is recognizing and expressing thanks for what Jesus is doing in, through, and around us. We're going to learn to open up our eyes a bit to see the ways that God is finishing what he started around us and praising him for it. so that we can be a people like Paul, who even in the midst of less than ideal circumstances can have joy and give thanks, knowing that God is using whatever is coming at us for our good and his glory. You can find all the information about how we'll do this on our series page at midtownlexington.com, and we'll talk about it more in our life groups this week. But I just want to say that's our plan for this summer. That's where we're going, that we would be a people who find joy in the God who don't quit.